Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beyond the Home Study podcast. This is where we have real conversations with parents of foster children, adoptive children, and we help you navigate the world beyond paperwork and placement. So, Laura Rose and I are here with a new friend, Karen.
Karen, you guys. Karen Henderson is the director of programs of CASA of the River Region, and we are so excited to have her here with us today. And as you guys know, this month we're really focusing on foster care. We really wanted to just dive in, and Karen is our expert in this. Beyond CASA, she can tell you she's got a whole history, and we're really, really thankful for her knowledge. And I'm just really excited to talk to her today so that you guys can get this inside information. We talk a lot from parents, and we heard from my story last week, and next week we're going to hear from someone who was a former foster youth. But Karen is here to be our expert. So, Karen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you kick us off with telling us what is CASA? Because a lot of our listeners probably have no clue what CASA even means or what it is.
Absolutely. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. We are volunteers that go into the family court system and help support children who are in the dependency, abuse, and neglect courts. A lot of times, kids come in because of educational neglect or a physical or emotional neglect or abuse that may have happened within the home. We are at the beginning of the process. Once the investigation begins, goes into family court, and the judges actually appoint CASA to be that extra eye and ear for that child. Sometimes we have children that are there by themselves with one child, or we might have sibling groups of 3 to 5 children or even more. Our volunteers are just that. They're volunteers. They're individuals that give up their time, space, and energy to help advocate for that child. And when I say advocate, our advocates do just that. They speak with the child, around the child, about the child. The families are important. Absolutely, they are. But sometimes a child may be afraid to speak on behalf of with a family member in the room. They may not want to tell their whole story. But that advocate, that CASA, is that one consistent adult that will follow them from biological home to grandparents' home to foster home to residential home back to adult, wherever they may be. CASA is that consistent adult that will be there throughout the whole process from beginning to end. We don't leave until there's a disposition and there is a forever family for that child.
Wow.
Yeah, that is awesome. I was telling Laura a little bit before we started. I know of CASA from the yard signs that I would
Oh,
see
yeah.
around. And there was one of my neighbors had a yard sign at one point, and I always looked at it and I thought, huh, I wonder, like, what is this really about? And I learned more about foster care and I went to adoption court and, I've done some different
Yeah,
things like that. But I had no idea what all CASA entailed. So, thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome.
absolutely. Our volunteers are very, very special to us. They're young, they're old, they're at least 21 years of age, but we have some that are in their 80s even. But even if they can spend time to read a
Wow.
book or take a child out to ice cream or even be there to let that child talk, that's that's what's important about our CASAs. I love our CASAs. They are there. They have been around for a long time. We've got some that's been in CASAs for over 20 years. Um, but it doesn't take a lot to be a CASA, and a lot of people don't know that. They don't realize that.
Love that they are that consistent piece, that when we were going through the foster care journey with my daughter, we'd have I don't know how many social workers we had involved, and things get missed all the time
Yes.
with that. And we were not appointed a CASA worker for her case, but just even having one consistent person who's been through it, especially since it sounds like a lot of your volunteers are very well trained and knowledgeable. They've been in the court system. So for a new foster parent, you're like, I don't know what's going on. Um, and then that child piece, like having that them just to have that consistency. That's amazing. I love that.
We're in 7 counties. I don't know if people knew that. River Region covers 7 counties. We're in Jefferson, Bullitt, Shelby, Spencer, Henry, Oldham, and Trimble counties. Now, there are CASAs across Kentucky. Out of 99 counties, there is a CASA somewhere. all across the state of Kentucky. We cover 7 counties. Within our 7 counties, we have over 165 active volunteers, and we've served over 520 children just last year.
Wow.
There's so many more children waiting for an advocate, so many more. We have over 300 children waiting today for that special person that we just don't have enough volunteers out there to really cover that base. But we love our children and I love our CASAs. Our CASAs are amazing.
About how many children would one CASA volunteer, be appointed over? What does that look like, the ratios?
Good question. I have 7 advocacy supervisors in each of the counties that I just mentioned. They're responsible for up to 30 volunteers. And each volunteer can have anywhere from 1 case to 2 or sometimes 3 cases. One family can have 1 child or up to 3 children. We have some cases in some of our rural counties that have up to 10 children. And if
Wow.
they're up to 10 children, I might have to put 2 CASAs on that just so
Yeah.
that we give every child an opportunity to say what they have to say to that special individual. And they work very closely together. We served over 250 children for Christmas this year, just giving Christmas presents and love and joy where they probably
Oh,
would not have had a Christmas. So 1 CASA can have anywhere from 1 to 3 to 5 children. And if it's more than 5, then we do pair up our volunteers because it can be a little traumatizing. Our
wow.
kids have gone through so much, and secondary trauma is real. Secondary trauma to a volunteer who has to hear that story over and over again can be pretty harrowing. So we have trainings and times where our volunteers can come together and really lay it on the table. Because of HIPAA, they can't tell their family members about what's going on, but they can tell their fellow peer CASAs. And
Mhm.
we do that, try and do that at least once a month, just so they can have a chance to really get it off their chest. But a lot of our CASAs can reach out to their supervisors. They have really good connections with their caseworkers. You said, you had a lot of social workers go through while you were going through the process, and turnover is high in social services field. But we have a connection with social services in all those counties. I have a special connection with their supervisors and their leaders. So if we don't get the movement that we need, then I'm making a phone call, I'm making a visit, or I'm going to court to help support that volunteer so that child and that family can get the resources that they need.
So you kind of mentioned this earlier when you were saying what CASA was, but can you tell me a little more about how a child gets a CASA worker? So my daughter
Absolutely.
didn't have one. Why not? And what when would a child get a CASA worker?
Good question. Um, when the investigation team investigates an abuse and neglect allegation, it comes into family court. Family court will hear the case. CASA's always in the courtroom in each of the counties. They always show up at the courtroom, and it's called a temporary removal hearing. So, the temporary removal hearing, the judge will decide whether the child gets to stay in the biological home, go to a foster home, or go to a relative home. Whatever decision that judge may make, the judge would want to get extra eyes and ears on that child. So you may have not gotten a CASA because it was a very smooth case. The parent may have decided, yes, I did do something to harm the child, which is a stipulation, and they just want to see the process through. Not all cases are that smooth. Some cases there's drug abuse or there's continued domestic violence going on, and the judge just doesn't know what's happening. They can't make an informed decision without knowing exactly where that child is. So that's when the judge decides to appoint a CASA. When it's a harrowing case, when it's a case that mom says that the paramour is in the home uh, and the paramour is not supposed to be in the home, CASA can be there. We have Kentucky state regulatory statutes that say that we can go to visit that child when that child needs us to be there. We don't have to go announce, even though it's respectful to announce. But the judge wants eyes and ears on that child. So we follow the process and we report back to the judge. Uh, we hope to work, work hand in hand with the social worker, but our reports are independent from any state reports, any legal reports, any documents from any other party. We are independent organization to be that eye and ear for that child. And 9 times out of 10, because our volunteers are just that, they're volunteers. They're not paid by those entities. They're going to tell the judge exactly what it is that they see. And the judge takes credence with the information that we're there to share. So that's when a CASA is appointed. So the judge will appoint the CASA at the temporary removal hearing, and then we'll follow the case through pre-trial and then trial and then review. And then we stay in that process until an informed decision is made for the permanency of that child.
There's so many different steps and things along the way. Like I mean, Laura has gone through, foster care to then adoption. We've talked to others, and it seems like there's no specific path when you hear all these different stories. But really, when you're looking at it from even the way you just broke it down of like, do, like this is how it needs to go. It sounds like, oh, this could be so smooth. Like, why doesn't it always work like this? But obviously, that's where the CASAs come into play of helping to, continue to usher that child through.
We continue to maneuver through that process so that the parents and the children, when they do come to court, they know what to expect. If it's an older child and the judge may want them to testify, the CASA is sitting right next to them, hand in hand, arm in arm, just to make sure they're comfortable and confident in what they're telling the judge. I've seen some stories that would make you cry. That the 16-year-old child would tell a judge, "I just want my mom to love me. I want
Oh,
my stepdad to not hit me anymore. But if my mom can just love me, I want to stay with her. But if not, then I have to go somewhere else. I just want my mom to, can you tell my mom to love me?" And, you know, when you hear that in court, and of course they did it in chambers and you could see it on the screen, but the parents could hear, and the dad is in the courtroom saying, "Yes, he will come with me. Yes, he will," while mom is saying he's just lying. He's not telling the truth. So that's a hard day. That's a hard moment. But when you hear that child, and the child will say, and the judge says, "How did you know to say those words?" And he said, "My casa helped me." So that's what CASA does. CASA gives that confidence to that child, no matter how old they are, from young to old, to take that next step to be confident and saying where they want to be and how they can be safe.
yeah, it sounds like there's just a really huge impact of, the CASA worker on the child. And I'm sure the volunteer, also is impacted. When I worked in a residential home, there was a boy that quite frankly I was a little scared of. He was one of the only children there that I felt fearful to be around. But he had a CASA worker. They didn't all have CASA workers, but he did. And he was a different child with that CASA worker. And this boy was a could hurt someone had he wanted to, and this was a frail little old woman, and she would, like, just sit with him and read books with him, and they would draw together, and I remember being like, "Wow. Wow, this is so crazy. This kid that I was so scared of 10 minutes ago looks like he is just." Oh, it was so amazing to see.
Yes, it is amazing to see. I love teenagers. I love going into court. I go into court every so often if there's a challenging case or things aren't moving as quickly, then I do go to court to support my volunteers and advocacy supervisors. And there was one young man who was 16 years old. He hadn't been to school in 2 years. He his parents spoke Russian. They did not speak English. And he was verbally abusive to them. So he didn't go to school. So he would go to court and judges saying, and he had a CASA. The CASA bought a shirt and tie for him to go to court. He's like, "Oh, I don't want that. I can stand up on my own." And he said, "Okay, but I'm here to help you." He said, "Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah." So we went into court, and my supervisor said, "I need you to help me get through to this young man." I said, "I love teenagers. I worked for Mary Hurst for a long time. I worked in residential, and I love the scary teenagers. I love them." Um, so we went in and the judge said, "Well, why aren't you going to school?" He said, "Because it's boring. I don't want to go to school." And she said, "Well, it's the law. You have to go to school or I'm gonna have to hold your parents in contempt." He says, "I don't care." She said, "Okay, I'm giving you 7 days. So if you're not in school in 7 days, I'm holding you both in contempt." He said, "So what?" So we walked out of the courtroom, and mind you, I'm 5'2". I put heels on when I go to the court, so I look grown up. And he was like 6'1". And I'm looking up at him and I said, "So do you understand what the judge just said?" He said, "Yeah." She said something about contempt. I said, "Contempt means your parents are going to a real American jail. They don't speak Russian in jail. And that's where they would go until you start school. And you would go to Eastern Kentucky where you can't run away and you go into a foster home that may or may not understand your needs. but you're going to go to school one way or the other. How about we just sit down and write some goals out and get this done? So I sit in the courthouse with him for about 15 to 20 minutes. We set up goals. He tried to be sharp with me. I sharp right back. I said, okay, let's go back again. Let's find some respect. And we did that. And I'm proud to say that he graduated early. He started going to online school. I would call him sporadically just out of the blue. And I told him if he didn't answer the phone, I was going to report that to the judge that you were not cooperating. So every time I called, he answered the phone. And the one time he didn't answer the phone, he was on the phone with his professor, and he called me back in 5 minutes and apologized 10 times from Tuesday. So he got through school. We got him through school. He graduated, and the day before he graduated, he called me and said, Miss Karen, I forgot to call you. I'm graduating tomorrow. Can you be there? I want you there with me. And I said, absolutely, I'm going. So my granddaughter and I packed up and we went to Broadbent Arena and I screamed my face off. He was talking while he was on the stage and says, I'm here. And he's like, oh my God, you're here. Are you serious? I said, of course I am. So, I saw him once more after that at the fair. He ran across, this big, tall, bulky guy runs across the fair to give me a hug to say thank you. And his whole family was saying, thank you so much for getting him through. That's a success story, but it didn't have to be. It could have gone a whole different direction. But that's what faith we have in our kids, and our CASAs do it every single day. I'm just so extra proud of them.
That's so good. I love that story. You're obviously very passionate about what you do now, but can you just tell us kind of like what was your journey to get you to this position of director? I think it will help kind of, the listeners to fill in some of the gaps maybe.
Absolutely. I've worked in adult psychiatric, Central State Hospital. I've worked in children's psychiatric, Our Lady of Peace, Maryhurst. Maryhurst was the last journey I had before I came to CASA. In the midst of that, I worked as the executive director of an intellectual disability facility for adults. These were adults who had very low IQs. They were very aggressive, and I served as executive director. While I was there, I got a phone call from my son that, well, even before that, my grandson was dropped off at my home, um, and they didn't come back. There was some substance abuse going on, and they never came back to get him. So he was in my home a year. I started, figuring out how to do this all over again. And then I got a phone call a year later, meet your granddaughter. I said, "What are you talking about?" So he sent me a picture of a baby in an incubator. So I got the story. My granddaughter was born at home, rushed to the hospital with no prenatal care. Mom had been using, my son was an enabler. So they didn't know what to do. They rushed to the hospital and the baby was born. Her name is Hope. She was in the hospital. When I got to the hospital, they had left the hospital already. So it was just me. And I was the only one that was visiting the hospital. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. The baby is having some withdrawals. I've been in this field for a very long time, but I've never had this scenario happen to me. So the social worker was amazing. It was the same social worker I had. She says, well, we'll put the child in, she's going to be here for a while because she needs to wean off the drugs, and then she'll go to foster care. So I said, okay, then you'll give me a chance to kind of get my bearings and figure out how I'm going to raise a baby all over again. I'm 61 years old. At the time, I was in my early 50s. I'm like, what am I doing with this baby? So after a while, I met her. She got one. It was an amazing foster home. I said I couldn't be more blessed for this foster home because it was a retired NICU nurse. So it was someone who had been through the journey and understood the journey and helped her get through the journey. So after 6 weeks in foster care, the social worker said, we're at that turning point. We got to decide what to do because she's getting older. She's getting attached. I said, well, let me take it. Let me take her. So I brought her home, and this brand new baby bundle of joy that still had some medical issues. I was taken back and forth to the hospital, trying to run an organization at the same time. And I'm like, my world is upside down. So I took her home. I took her to my church. I'm very involved in my church, as I've said before. And I've asked the church to help me. I asked the church to be their godparent. So the whole church is their godparents. We went before the
Oh.
church and they all signed it up. And trust me, they are very serious about these kids. So right now they are 9 and 12. My oldest told me that his birthday's in March and he's going to be a teenager. God help us all. Um, but they are my heart. So through all the process, I became the kinship guardian. So that's my journey from that part. So I moved further into Maryhurst. Um, I started small and did like a paid CASA role in the outpatient program. And then someone got a hold of my resume and said, "Yeah, you're in the wrong spot." So they made me director of foster care. So I was a director of foster care at Maryhurst for 3 years, right before the pandemic. I did all the training, I certified homes. I had a staff of some amazing people to go out and help support our foster parents. Um, and then when the pandemic happened, things started to change. We started realizing that abuse was happening behind closed doors. So the whole time the world shut down, those children were in the homes. So the foster care program kind of diminished because we weren't getting a lot of referrals. So, and we knew that's what happened. I had stayed in contact with the Cabinet of Health and Family Services, their leadership, they're friends of mine. I talk to them all the time. And that's pretty much what they said. They opened up a lot of state foster homes that would take in children who would come through, a lot of families who were doing foster parent training so they can get the stipend to keep those children within their homes. And that was great. But the agency did not survive that. So I moved on to independent living and working with their teenagers, our teenage children. So as I was going through that, the children became more and more wayward. I love our kids, our girls at Maryhurst, love them dearly. And I said, I need a break. I need a change. My children are getting into dance and getting into sports. So I want to find an organization that will help give me the movement that I need to help support children in today's society. So CASA fell in my lap. Um, and I came to CASA, amazing organization. It had been around for 40 years. The CASA in Jefferson County in Louisville was the very first CASA 41 years ago. And it has grown to all the
Wow.
96 counties in Kentucky.
Wow.
So that's what brought me to CASA. I love CASA. I love the staff that we have. I love the mission that we have. And we want to serve every child that comes through the family court system. But unfortunately, we just don't have enough volunteers to do that.
I did want to go back for a minute. You were talking about when you were giving us your journey and your experience, you mentioned about the independent living. And I know that CASA really does have a big impact on, these kids when they are, getting close to aging out. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys handle that? And especially in light of like some of these new legislation that's been going on. Yeah, like what's that look like?
Yes. So we have a lot of kids who age out of the system or get close to aging out. A lot of times they come into care when they're with a sibling group. So the younger children are in foster care or they're going to a biological home, but the oldest child is left in limbo. They are left to understand what it is that they have. So we connect with KentuckyRise.org. KentuckyRise.org is a website that will give um, a child 16 and up the opportunity to learn new skills, to learn about independent living, to learn financials, to learn how to budget when they get a job, what FICA looks like, why is FICA existent. None of us like FICA, but when you're 16, 17 years old, your first job is kind of a shock. So the Kentucky Rise program helps with that. A lot of children who are in foster care or in long-term care where the family just haven't kept up, don't have the birth certificates or social security cards, the Kentucky Rise program can help them get that birth certificate or social security card or get them in pre-independent living housing, get them a social worker, go through the process of helping them understand what it looks like as you adult. A driver's license, help to get the material you need to get a driver's license. The Kentucky Rise site is an amazing site. It covers all of those things. When I worked for Maryhurst, that was a program that I did run. I was the leader of that program for independent living and transition services. So as they transition into adulthood, what does it look like to get a paycheck, to get an apartment,
Mhm.
to budget money? So children who come through the CASA journey, we take through that same journey. Unfortunately, some of those have children, so now we have to worry about the 16-year-old with a baby, helping them to understand that they can parent. So helping to connect them with uh, parenting classes and get them resources and get them connected with an organization that has diapers or baby clothes or things that they may need. We don't let them give up. We've got to have a young lady who has been with the CASA since she was 15. She's now 18 and she's got 2 children. And we've carried her through her entire journey. Sometimes she can get a little rugged and gets a little upset with things, but she's a teenager with babies. So we help walk her through that, help her understand this is life. We're not going to be here forever, but we can help you walk through that journey. And Kentucky Rise is that organization as a part of the Cabinet of Health and Family Services that helps connect those resources. So we use them a lot.
That's so sweet. And I mean, I can imagine your volunteers are like, this brings so much joy and light to their whole lives as they're able to, get to hear these stories. And I mean, it really, every story you've shared, it just defies the odds of what you think may happen to these kids or to this young mom or whatever it might be. And so I can only imagine how much of a blessing it is, really, to be able to be impacted by these kids. So,
Yes, we
with that,
yes.
I would
Um,
love for you to just like break it all down for us. What does it mean to be a volunteer? How can we, really encourage our listeners to sign up? What does that look like?
Absolutely. So, to become a CASA volunteer, the first thing you have to do is make the commitment. That's the first thing. We have a lot of people who reach out to us to say, I want to be an advocate. I want to save the world. Well, we're not here to save the world. We're here to advocate for a child and give them a voice. Sometimes that voice might not be what we want to hear, but it's their voice. So, once you have made the commitment, this is what you want to do. You reach out to our office. You're interviewed by our training manager. Our training manager gives a short interview and kind of gives you a day in the life of a CASA. Then we start training process. We have trainings once a month. Again, they're 2.5 weeks at a time. It's about 30 hours of training. And in that training, we talk about trauma informed care. We talk about minimal sufficient level of care because as foster parents, you know that the state looks at only is there water, is there food, is there shelter. And sometimes coming into this environment is hard to really grasp your hands around, but it's not good shelter, it's not clean water, it's not a lot of healthy food. But we have to teach our volunteers what to look for when you see the minimum sufficient level of care. We teach about cultural differences and cultural challenges. We talk about biological families and what it looks like to have a safe environment. Reunification is something we always look for, but reunification doesn't always mean back to the birth family. Sometimes it means to the foster home or it means to the grandparents' home. So we talk about that within our training. So it's about 30 hours of training. We do it in 2.5 weeks. There's some reading you'd have to do, a little bit of homework, some videos you'd have to watch, but all of it culminates into the work that we do as a CASA. Once you're finished with that 2.5 weeks of training, you're introduced to a supervisor. That supervisor then will take you into the courtroom. You get to observe a day in the life of a day of family court, and you get sworn in by the judge. That's our favorite part. You get sworn in, and now you are an advocate and someone who works within the court system. Once you take that leap, then you get to sit down with your advocacy supervisor, and you get to choose a case. If you don't want to work with adult or teenagers, then we won't give you a case with teenagers. If you want to work with a baby, maybe from the NICU or a sibling group of 2 to 3, you get to choose. You get to choose what you and your family are ready for. The average time that it takes to be a CASA is about 4 to 6 hours a week. That's not a lot of time. We spend that much time on the internet or on our phones. But 4 to 6 hours a week, and even that 4 to 6 hours a week is contacting the social worker, contacting the school, documenting notes into the system, seeing that child at least once a month. But a lot of times you're pushed to see that child even more because that child opens up and blossoms when they see a CASA pull up. We're there to help provide resources to the family, whether it's the foster family or to the birth family. But once again, it's only 4 to 6 hours a week, possibly 10 to 12 hours a month. So it's not a lot of time at all. We go to court maybe once every 6 weeks, depending on the case. And then once every 6 weeks, you would write a court report, and then you would go and present that court report to the courts, to the judge. But that's about the life of a CASA. We have ongoing training, 12 hours a year for training. We offer all kinds of training, all kinds of refreshers. We have a round table, as I mentioned earlier, that our volunteers can come together once a month just to kind of share their own stories and ask for more training or ask for more things. And we love that aspect. But there's lots of different ways that they can get their education, their continuing education. But that's the life of a CASA. It sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not. It's that energy and the love that's in your heart to make it happen.
Love that in addition to the training, to prepare, you also have this resource for the volunteers because, yeah, burnout's real. Secondary trauma is real, and not being able to talk to someone about it, because of HIPAA, like that's an amazing resource that you are offering, your volunteers. So to me, that right there is like, oh man, that's another level of care. I really
Yes.
love that.
Yes. That's support at its finest.
Well, so you said the first thing they need to do is if you are interested, if this is to all you listeners out there, if you're thinking, hey, I, can't be a foster parent or that's not, for me, but I really, really want to support families. CASA volunteer sounds like maybe it's up my alley. Where do they go first? You said they call or they email who?
They go to casariverregion.org. That's our website. And on our website, you click the button that says Tell Me More. And once you go on to Tell Me More, there's a short 1 minute video that talks about CASA. And then you can put an application right in there on that website. It takes all of 5 minutes to complete that process. Then our training manager will give you a call. Usually she's really fast. Once it pops up on our screen, there's an application there. She's making that phone call to get you in our trainings. And we've got trainings coming up again every month that there's a training. Right now they're in Jefferson County and Bullitt County, and we are training from 5:30 to 8 twice a week for 2.5 weeks. So we'd love to have your viewers call us, reach out, and come join us as a CASA.
All right, so I'm going to drop that link at the bottom of our show notes. So if anyone is interested, you can do that. And Karen, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Absolutely. This is so much fun. I do want to say that there's an event that's coming up that everybody can come to. It's a free event. It is Embrace a Child. It is Friday, March the 27th at the Olmsted in Louisville. It's a brunch. We have speakers. We have family court judges will be there. But it's an opportunity for people to learn more about CASA before they can even sign the dotted line, before they even want to fill out the application. Come have brunch with us and get to know about CASA. We have this event every year along with other events, but this is our favorite because people get to come and have brunch with us and just hear about CASA without having to put a dime down or put your name down. We'd love to have you. We'd love to you join us, but just come hear about who we are and what we're about.
So good. Thank you so much, Karen. It was great to meet
Absolutely.
you via the podcast. And
Mm.
yeah, hopefully we'll cross paths again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, you're so welcome. Guys, don't forget to check out that show notes and that event. I will link that as well because who doesn't love brunch? And for all of you listeners, if anything we said today has made you laugh, cry, or feel seen, please share this with a friend, and we'll see you again next week.